I'd be able to come speak to you, and I was very excited to do so. So today I want to talk about the Constitution, and Jason's right. I keep it close to my heart, right next to my breast pocket. And I hope everyone in this room gets a chance to read the Constitution at some point. It's a short document. The entire thing is barely 20 pages long. It may take you 15 minutes to read the entire thing. What's remarkable about our Constitution is how it's endured, how for over 220 years this simple document has guided everything that goes on in this country and protects the most fundamental freedoms, controls government, and lets us exist to be the greatest nation in the world. So what I want to talk about today is one aspect of our Constitution called the separation of powers. And we have in our government three branches of government. Let's see. Any of the kids know? What are our three branches of government? Come on, kids. Raise your hands. What are they? Three branches of government. Come on, little ones. Yeah. Executive, legislative, and judicial. Okay. Now, does anyone know why we have the three branches? It's an even better question. Anyone want to guess? Why do we have these separate powers? Why can't we have it all together? Anyone know? Checks and balances. What are these checks and balances? You didn't think you have a class tonight, did you? What are these checks and balances? Why is it important to check and balance power? Because no one has too much, and that's exactly the right insight that the framers of our Constitution had. The idea was we don't want any one person to govern having too much power. Because when one person has too much power, it leads invariably to tyranny. We fought a war with the British over an all-powerful monarch, a king, who decided everything. When we go to war, what taxes we pay, what time we can wake up in the morning. Every aspect of our life was dictated by a king. So the framers of our Constitution said, no more. We will separate. We will divide these powers up into different branches. And what are these branches? There's the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And what are the roles of each of these branches? Simply stated, they each have the power they're given in the Constitution. So what about the Congress, the legislative branch? What does the Congress do? Well, they make laws. Congress is responsible for designing what are the laws we have. We have two branches. We have the House of Representatives, and we have the Senate. The House of Representatives have members in states. The Senate has also members by the states. We vote for the people who go to Washington. And they're responsible for making the laws that control everything in our country. We also have, though, you may know, state government, right? How do we have a state government and a federal government? Where are these different legislatures go for? You're not too far from Austin here. Well, we have different branches. The federal government does what's for the federal government, and the state government does what's for the state government. Okay? So that's Congress. What's our second branch? It's the president, the executive branch. And what does he do? He enforces the laws. He is the commander-in-chief of the military. He is the chief law enforcement officer of the entire country. He makes sure that all the laws that Congress passes are put into effect. And he must do so faithfully to make sure that people follow the law, as does he. And what's this final branch we have in our government, right? It's the courts. And why are the courts so significant? The reason why the courts are so significant is to make sure we have an independent branch to ensure that people adhere to the law. I'm sure we have right here in Austin County. Someone gets in trouble, one of these fine officers will take him for a nice ride in a car and take him to a little box with some bars on it maybe if they misbehave. And then at some point, I'm sure there's a judge somewhere in this room who will say, hey, you're in trouble, buddy. We need separate branches of government to ensure at every juncture power is shared. Right? Because what happens if you have an officer that makes a mistake? Maybe he picks up the wrong guy. Maybe he's enforcing the wrong law. A judge will say, let him go. Right? The entire idea of the separation of powers is to make sure we're human. We make mistakes. James Madison, one of our founding fathers, in Federalist Papers, Federalist number 51, a great quote, he said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If we were angels, if we were perfect, we would not need government. But the reason why we need government, why we have this Constitution, is because we're not perfect. We are fallible, we make mistakes. And if everyone is checking each other, everyone's making sure that no one takes too much authority, that ensures at every juncture that there will be no tyranny. Okay, so then what do we have today? right? Well, the Constitution has more or less remained in the same shape, size, and page limit for nearly 2 centuries. There have been 27 amendments to the Constitution, which is not very much. And the Constitution's been changed in a few ways. Now we have guarantees of free speech. I'm sure in this room you like the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. You have protection from search and seizure, which I'm sure the officers know a lot about, right? We have these different guarantees that not only respect the structure of our government, but our individual freedoms. The government can't restrict our freedom of speech. They can't restrict our freedom of religion. They can't take away our guns. They can't search our home without a warrant. They can't take our property without compensation. These are all guarantees right there in the Constitution, which are designed to protect our most fundamental freedoms. And at heart, what the Constitution does is it creates a separation between us and the state, between us and the government. And at every juncture, it's there to ensure that we as individuals remain free. But problems arise. Okay? Where do problems arise? When one branch tries to do too much. When one branch of government tries to take too much power unto themselves. And this isn't just a problem in the presidency. Invariably, every branch of government will try to accept too much authority. So let's think about Congress, right? How can Congress overstep their bounds and take too much power? Well, as I said, the federal government sits in Washington, and they can legislate on matters affecting the entire country. What happens when Congress tries to regulate things which aren't of the federal government's business? I'm talking about a law I'm sure you know about called Obamacare, also called the Affordable Care Act. Jason, wave the book around for a second. We have this is the book I wrote, which I'm not selling. I have no copies for sale. But what was wrong with Obamacare? Right? Why was Obamacare such a controversial law? Well, the way Obamacare works says, okay, you're required to buy health insurance. And if you don't buy health insurance, we're going to hit you with a penalty. Can Congress do this? Does Congress have the power to require us to buy health insurance? Well, Congress does have the power to regulate commerce between the states. If I want to buy something in Arkansas or buy something in Louisiana, Congress could regulate that. But can Congress tell me, as an individual, that I have to buy something? That was the question in this case. The Supreme Court said, the answer is no. Congress went too far. It was unprecedented, in fact. And the reason why Congress went too far was that they were not regulating commerce. They were forcing you to engage in commerce. They were making you buy a product. And as we as free people cannot be forced to do stuff, we can't be required to buy something. And that was considered an unconstitutional act. And who said that? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was there to make sure that Congress did not overstep its bounds, that Congress did not go too far in trying to infringe upon the freedoms of individuals. So you see what happens when one branch tries to go too far. The courts step in as the backdrop to ensure that everyone remains in their proper place. Okay? But Congress isn't the only branch that misbehaves. The president often misbehaves. And in recent years, there's been a lot of misbehaving. So one aspect I'd like to talk about is the president's duty. And I'm sure you all law enforcement officers know this. You have a job, and you are there to enforce the law. And you have a duty to enforce the law passed by your city council, passed by your state, passed by your county. If any of you walked in the job and said, you know what, I don't want to pull that guy over. I don't feel like it. You'd probably get in trouble. If any of you police officers said, you know what, I'm going to say speed limit 65, I won't pull you over until you go 75. I put up a huge sign saying speed limit 65, but I will not pull you over until you go to 75. You'd probably get fired very quickly. But even worse than you getting fired, which is not a good thing, you would basically be giving people a license to break the law. You would be telling people in advance, I am not going to arrest you unless you do something that's really bad. Okay? That is not how law enforcement works. Law enforcement works because, of course, you're not going to pull over every single speeder. It's impossible. But the risk exists. You know that maybe if one day I'm going over the limit, I'm going to get pulled over and get a ticket. This is how the laws work. People react. They respond to the laws. So let's look what's going on with immigration now in the United States. The president has instituted a couple policies which have attempted to exempt millions of people from the scope of the immigration laws. And he says, I will not deport you. I will give you work authorization. And this is okay. Now, has Congress given the president the power not to deport millions of people? Not exactly. So what has the president said? I will exercise discretion. The same way that one of the officers in this room says, I'm going to pull over this guy, but not that guy, or I will only pull people over when they go 75, not 65. The president said like this, I'm simply saying I'm not going to deport them. I exercise discretion. But more than that, he's sending letters to people saying, oh, by the way, even though you're not here legally, I will not deport you. I won't do it. This is the same way if the sheriff in this town sent a letter to thousands of people saying, I will not pull you over unless you go 75. Here's a license to speed. This is bad policy, but even worse, it's unconstitutional. And why is this unconstitutional? The president, like every law enforcement officer, has a duty to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. You have to act faithfully to make sure the laws are put into effect. Is this being done now? Of course not. It's not being done. And the president, in my estimation, is acting unlawfully. I'm actually, in addition to being a professor, I'm actually filing a brief on behalf of the state of Texas in their current challenge to the executive action, and this will very likely go to the Supreme Court soon. Okay, so we have examples where Congress misbehaves, and then we have examples where the president misbehaves. But do we have examples where the courts misbehave, right? And I'm sure there are examples of cases that people can think of where they say, you know what, I don't like what the court did there. Maybe some people say, a case like Roe v. Wade, you know what, I don't like what the court did there. Abortion should not be legal. Maybe some people don't like a case like District of Columbia versus Heller. This is a case involving the Second Amendment that said everyone has the right to own a gun. I'm sure a lot of people, not in this county, will say, that's wrong. People should not be allowed to own guns. So what do? We have a Supreme Court that decides cases, often on a divided basis, saying you have the right to an abortion, or you have the right to a gun. You have a right to same-sex marriage, which we might see in a few months. How do we understand judges who are not elected, and they're not accountable, making decisions that affect wide-ranging social policy? Why do we have this? Why do we respect courts to make these sorts of decisions? I think the answer is, if they don't do it, we're in trouble, right? If we don't have an independent court system, an independent judiciary, what's going to happen when we need them, right? So think of a case involving Little Rock, Arkansas, not too far from here. 1960s, Central High School in Little Rock. School is segregated. High school is segregated. A court said, desegregate. Let in children of color into the school. The governor of Arkansas went to the schoolhouse and stood in the door and said, I will not admit these students. The court said, let them in. He ignored them. Same thing happened in Alabama, at the University of Alabama. You had the governor of the state standing in the door of the building, not letting in black students. So what do? Right? What do we do when people start ignoring courts? This is where stuff gets fun. What happened in the case in Arkansas? President Eisenhower sent the airborne. He sent in federal troops into Little Rock, Arkansas, to guide these children into school so they could have an education. What happens when people start ignoring courts and not listening to them? Well, the courts don't have any power. They don't have any money. All they have is their own judgment. And unless the president sends in federal troops to ensure that they have access to schools, people ignore them. So while you may not agree with what a lot of what courts do, it's important that we respect them and ensure that people adhere to them. Because the alternative, my friends, is a lot worse. Okay? So So we have Congress, we have the presidency, we have the courts, we have all these different branches working together. But what's the other aspect of our federal government that people don't think nearly enough about? The answer is the states. We have in this country one federal government, but we have 50 states. Each state has its own governor, executive branch. Each state has its own legislature. Each state has its own court system. And the importance of having 50 states is that we have 50 different ways of doing things. Maybe New York wants to look at a problem one way, and Texas wants to look at a problem in a better way. A different way, right? Every state, yeah, you got that one, right? Every state wants to look at things differently. And this is not by accident. Our framers recognize that having too much power concentrated in one place is dangerous. By splitting up the powers, not only to the 3 branches, but to now 50 states, was a way to ensure that the authority is close to the people. That your government in Austin is much more responsive than your government in Washington. Your government right here in Austin County is going to be very responsive. You can walk up to the mayor sitting right there. You can talk to him. You can tell him what's bothering you. He may not listen, but you can tell him what's bothering you, right? But we have local government because it responds. You know him. You know his name. You can see where he lives. People in Washington are not that responsive. So when the framers designed this document, this short 20-page document could fit in your pocket, they designed such a magical system that not only divides up power and allows people to remain free and close to home, but they also allow it as a way to create freedom and protect freedom. The mere fact that we have a freedom of speech or a right to bear arms doesn't mean anything. The only reason why we have this right to bear arms is because we have a court system to make sure it's not infringed. We have a legislature to pass laws protecting gun rights, and we have an executive to make sure that people are allowed to enforce those. Each branch of our government ensures that our liberties are in place. And if any one of those branches tries to take too much power, the other branches should be able to check them back. This doesn't always happen, and very often the government's not willing to take a fight, which is often quite dangerous. But the design of our Constitution is meant in this magical way to protect our freedoms and keep us safe from government. Thank you very much, and I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Don't give a common law professor too often. You can try and stump me. Anything? No? All right. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you so much, Professor Blackman. On behalf of the Austin County Peace Officers Association, we'd like to present you with this.
Thank you so much.
So it's a little gift from us.
Let's see, what do we got here? Whoa! Oh, well, this was nice of you. Thank you so much, Jason. This is
Our
really
pleasure.
cool. Gift card, Darden's. We're getting some cheesy bread now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.